Hi guys, Rachel Lighty here, CyberSage Solutions. I am recording today's video on my phone. It's been a really long day. I am at CEIC East. This is day one. Day one's, it's a wrap. It's been a great, very long day. A lot of great socializing, spreading good information, making a lot of good connections. Anyway, later this evening when I went back to my room and I was going to be uploading today's video for my mini series, which I'm doing this week, that is covering common issues and associated lessons learned with the implementation of NIST SP 800-171 that I've seen frequently enough during my time of assessing the implementation of the cyber requirements that I felt it would be beneficial to share this information with the community. Today's video is going to be on evidence, and I was unable to log into Canva this evening, which is where I had my presentation and I do my recording. So I'm unable to provide you that lovely presentation and similar recordings that you've seen Monday through Wednesday of this week. However, I did commit to posting these videos each day this week, and so I'm gonna stick to that commitment, and I'm recording this topic on my phone. I've made a couple notes here. I'm gonna cover everything that I wanted to cover. It is a short topic to begin with. The topic today was evidence, if I didn't already say that. So let's get started. So evidence. Evidence is crucial for an organization going into an assessment, whether that be an internal self-assessment or any external assessment. Evidence is required in order to validate the implementation of your controls and test to see or verify to see that they are implemented as originally designed and intended and working efficiently. So evidence, of course, is going to be crucial for an assessment. However, it's also crucial for you to collect this evidence during your time of implementing these requirements in order for you yourself to validate that the control and the intended output has been implemented effectively. So a couple things. I recommend, if you are currently working on implementing the NIST SP 800-171 in your environment, I recommend that you make it a point during this phase of implementation that as you complete each control, each objective, you collect and retain evidence and make a policy that you're going to retain this evidence for 6 years or more. You're going to use this evidence to, just verify and log, audit that you have implemented the control, or someone from your team or your company or HR or facility security, anybody has implemented the control. And then you're also going to be providing this evidence during your pre-assessment phase to any assessor. So let's talk about going into an assessment. Whether it be a self-assessment or external, when you move into an assessment, you're going to have this pre-assessment planning phase where you are going to provide this evidence to the assessor as an evidence package. They are going to then review this evidence to determine if you are ready to move into an assessment. So, and then during the assessment, You're also going to have to provide additional evidence, and we'll talk about why in a second, to further support your implementation of the requirements. So what evidence do you need? I recommend, again, as you're implementing the controls, that you collect evidence for each assessment objective. If you're past the phase of implementation and you're preparing for an assessment, or you're just seeing this video, then I would recommend start performing an internal self-assessment for each of the assessment objectives from NIST SP 800-171 Alpha A, which lists the assessment methodology and objectives. Oops, dropped my phone. Self-assess each objective, and then for each objective, try to collect evidence, whatever that objective is requiring. For example, if an objective says the organization must define, you're going to have a document that shows that you or the organization has defined whatever is required for that objective. If an objective says enforce a limit of unsuccessful logon attempts, so your evidence is going to be whatever is enforcing that requirement. Maybe, well, it's going to be configuration setting, a policy setting, GPO. So look at each objective, identify the action, identify the output, or what can be used to verify and validate that that objective is implemented in your environment. That's going to be your evidence. There are 320 assessment objectives in NIST SP 800-171 Rev 2. So you're looking at a lot of evidence. Now there are some objectives that it's going to be a little bit harder to collect the evidence for. There's going to be some objectives that, maybe the evidence is the same evidence as another control or another objective. But just try your best to collect evidence for each of the objectives and retain this evidence internally for 6 years. Then moving into your assessment, if you've done this process to identify the evidence that is required for each objective, then you're going to either, depending on when you initially collected this evidence, let's say it's been some time, 6 months, a year, what have you, then for that assessment, moving into that assessment, you're going to want to regenerate that evidence. However, if you've gone through the work to identify and collect that evidence previously, what you're going to just need to do at that point in time is then look at that evidence. Okay, it's a little outdated, but I know what I'm looking at. I'm just going to go collect the latest and most current evidence. If it's a screenshot, you'll take another screenshot. If it's a document, you go get the latest document, make sure it still says or meets the objective or the requirement that was originally collected for, that type of stuff. So even though you have this package or this folder of evidence, it may be outdated and you may have collected it a year or so ago. I'm hiding in a hallway. You're gonna have to collect that evidence and regenerate that evidence. But like I said, you've already done the work, so it should be quicker to know what you're looking for and maybe know who you gotta ask to get that evidence and where to look and what setting to capture and all that great stuff. Then you're going to provide this evidence during for your assessment, before your assessment. Another good reason why you should provide as much evidence as possible before and moving into your assessment is because it's gonna, essentially you're gonna drive the assessment. You're providing exactly what is needed to validate that implementation to the assessor. So then they're gonna look at this piece of evidence, and they're gonna see that the control or the objective is implemented, and then they will not look any further. However, if you do not provide them evidence that, directly supports the implementation of a certain objective or control, then they're gonna look further and do more investigating, do more sleuthing, if you will, to try to find the proper evidence. And so by providing them exactly what they need, you're kind of controlling the assessment and preventing them from looking in anywhere else and finding any potential other issues. However, hopefully you don't have any. But so you're controlling the evidence, that's a positive, right? Or you're controlling the assessment, that's a positive. You're giving them exactly what they need to know, what they need to look for, nothing more, nothing greater, nothing less. You're controlling the assessment. It's gonna be a lot smoother of assessment, it's gonna move a lot quicker, yada, yada, yada. So, let's talk about screenshots real quick. Screenshots are an acceptable evidence. I recommend in all of your screenshots, try to capture a timestamp. I know a screenshot usually does capture a timestamp, but if you look into like the settings or the info of that screenshot, but I'm talking about like actually on the screen, getting in the little right lower hand corner the date timestamp, the clock and the all that. And that's when you're moving into an assessment and you got to regenerate evidence for that assessment and collect new evidence. If you capture that and an assessor sees, well, okay, this screenshot was taken 2 days ago, 3 days ago, a week ago, that's better than, oh, it was taken 6 months ago, a year ago, So screenshots are great, but do make sure that they are current. Same thing with documentation is great, do make sure it's current. All right, and then during an assessment, there's 3 assessment methodologies that all assessors are trained on. These are the methods that they are going to utilize during your assessment to validate the implementation of these requirements. They are test, examine, and interview, Test, examine, and interview. Examine, of course, that's reviewing a document, observing a process, analyzing, inspecting a document, looking at screenshots, looking at settings, that type of activity. Interview, of course, is talking with someone at the company who is responsible for implementing that control requirement. They are holding a discussion, they are evaluating that individual, just holding a discussion with them, trying to better understand how the control is implemented, what it is that individual does, how frequently they're doing it, what processes they're following, what documentation do they have, what's the output, etc. That's interview. Test is the preferred method for all control requirements. It is a goal of an assessor to try to test as many of the controls and objectives they can in an environment. However, it can be hard to test certain objectives and certain controls. So, especially if it's like, well, whatever. It's preferred, it's the goal. However, they are not going to test all 110, 320 objectives. That's going to be pretty tough. But testing is actually exercising the assessment objective or control requirement. So for example, if, let's see, we'll do, I think it's 318, limit the number of unsuccessful logon attempts. I don't have the controls in front of me, so that's not word for word, but enforce or implement a limit of unsuccessful logon attempts. One of the objectives says the organization must define the limit of unsuccessful logon attempts. Another objective says the limit of unsuccessful logon attempts is enforced. So that second objective, you know, they may, this is a bad example, but just to keep it easy, what if, you know, they could potentially like ask you to log, you know, attempt to log in to your account purposely with a bad password a number of times, so that way they can see how many attempts it's going to take you in order for that limit, that threshold, whatever that threshold is, once it's reached, what's going to happen to the account. You know, your account's going to be locked out, or maybe you have to call the IT team to get it unlocked, or maybe it's going to be locked out for 15 minutes and you get to reattempt, you know, something like that. So they're going to actually exercise the assessment objective or control requirement in order to validate that what is required is actually implemented. That was a bad example though, because I do not think, you know, it could happen. Not a preferred test method, as we're not trying to make you lock your own account out during an assessment. Maybe a test account. However, good example, hopefully. So that's the 3 testing methodologies: examine, interview, test. That's what every assessor is trained to utilize during an assessment to validate the implementation of these controls. And how does this relate to evidence? Well, I have gone through assessments where during my assessment, I am testing an individual, or I'm testing the implementation of a control or assessment objective, or I am interviewing an individual. And they may get a little frustrated because I'm asking them questions about their processes, procedures, what it is they do, etc. That, you know, they're like, hey, why are you asking me that? I already provided the procedure. Why are you asking me that? We gave you the system security plan and it's documented right there. Well, that's a form of testing methodology, assessment methodology, is we understand if we go digging, we're going to see that you've defined this process, but I want to know from you, the person at the company responsible for implementing this requirement and performing this activity, what it is you do. Because if you're telling me something completely different than what is documented in your SSP or documented in the procedure that you provided me, there's a discrepancy there, right? So be patient, don't get frustrated, it's gonna happen. The 3 assessment methods are there for a reason, and it's very common that an assessor is going to use more than one method to test the implementation of a control. So even though you went through all this work to provide all this evidence for each objective and each control, and you get to the assessment and they're going to ask you the same stuff and repetitive stuff, and maybe they ask you to see the same settings, or they, you know, they're just ensuring that they are performing a good assessment and really testing the implementation of that control. So, and like I said, the preferred method is test. or the best method used is testing, a control or assessment objective that's going to really show us that the control is actually implemented as designed and working effectively. Interview is also a strong assessment method, and then examine. It's pretty much done for every objective almost, between documentation and screenshots and other types of evidence. We examine something almost for every control or objective. So let's wrap this discussion up. Evidence. I hope I've clarified what is evidence. I hope I have clarified what controls or objectives you need to provide evidence for. That's as many objectives as you can, as many as controls, as many of the controls as you can. Okay? Another thing I wanted to note on this is, let's go back to that 318 control, where the first objective is to define. The organization must define the limit of unsuccessful logon attempts. If you provide me, the assessor, a system security plan that says the organization has defined the limit of unsuccessful logon attempts in the identification and authentication policy, you have at least two pieces of evidence for that one objective. One, the SSP, and two is that identification and authentication policy. And so make sure that you provide evidence for each control, each objective, if you can. And then if that evidence is referencing another document, another setting, anything else, then also go out and collect that as evidence, as additional evidence, if it's needed to really truly validate the implementation of that objective. So that's evidence, and how much evidence you need, and that you should be collecting this evidence as you implement the controls. You should be collecting this evidence as you are performing the activity. For example, authorizing users in your environment. Every time a user is authorized access to the environment, whatever that authorization is, retaining it, keeping it, that's evidence. Keep it. Let's say you have a process for reviewing audit logs on a defined frequency. Every time that individual, make it a policy, make it a procedure, make it part of your process, that every time that individual goes and reviews that audit log within the defined frequency, they're just retaining that output. Let's say there's no output. They review the logs and they have nothing. There's no issues. A simple checklist or some sort of audit log or like entry log where, week of, 25th of November, system administrator Joe Smith checked audit logs for this, and this. No issues were found. Date and timestamp. That is evidence. That's going to show a log of activity over throughout the year that you are continuously performing this activity within the defined frequency, following the process that you guys have implemented. So it can be hard when you have a control or an objective that it's implemented, it's working, but there's really no evidence. So then you got to start to think of, how am I going to capture the fact that the control is working? It's doing what It's doing what it should do as designed, but you know, I'm gonna have to show evidence that it is. So what can I do to log that this activity is being performed and show that we are doing what we say we're doing? All right, so that is, let's see, and I really wish I had the PowerPoint, I'm sorry. Evidence, how much evidence? Preparing for an assessment, you're always gonna need new evidence. Outdated evidence is not acceptable. And then I went over the testing methodologies. So during the assessment, they're gonna collect additional evidence. They're gonna ask to see, you know, maybe the same evidence. Maybe you provided them a screenshot that malware protection was installed on, you know, your personal, not your personal, sorry, that your company issued laptop. You provided them a screenshot that says that your laptop has malware protection installed. Well, you have 100 laptops in your environment. So during the assessment, they may say, okay, great, thank you for that evidence, that's awesome, but then can you show me that on Nancy Smith's, there's a lot of Smiths here, on Nancy's laptop in the engineering department, can you show me that malware is on her laptop? Okay, so don't get frustrated with the assessors. We're not trying to find stuff that is wrong. However, unfortunately, there are sometimes individuals that are not truthful and providing inaccurate evidence, or they, you know, the whole like, it's not a lie, but I'm just admitting facts type thing. So maybe they're not directly lying to you, but they know there's an issue and they're not calling it out, but you can tell by the evidence that they've provided, and you know, they don't, maybe they're hiding something, and so you're looking around and you're just trying to figure out if the control is actually implemented at all times, at all places required in your environment. All right, I think that's about it. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna post this video. I hope it was helpful. And then when I do get access to Canva, I am going to upload my PowerPoint presentation so you guys all have that. But that's evidence. Shoot me a message if you have any questions, concerns, comments. I hope you found this information helpful. I hope I clearly communicated, you know, what is evidence and how you can be prepared for your assessment and what you should be doing throughout the year and throughout your time implementing the controls. Like I said, I'm at CEIC East. Tomorrow I'm speaking at 10:30 a.m. on inheritance and shared responsibility in the Cherry Blossom conference room. So if you're interested in hearing that conversation, I'm going to be speaking with Carly Salmon from Microsoft and Carly Logan from Summit 7. And yeah, thank you for your time. I apologize for how late this video is and how long it is and not providing you my wonderful presentation, but I hope you have a great evening, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Bye.